Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle of confusion where your words are twisted, your intentions misunderstood, and your reality questioned? Sometimes this happens with people we love and trust, people who present themselves as kind but subtly manipulate and control. This leaves you questioning your own worth and sanity. Could it be that you're facing someone driven by pride disguised as virtue? Today, we're diving deep into how to recognize and break free from these emotional traps. If this resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments below. Narcissism can take many forms: the arrogant, the victimized, the morally superior. C.S. Lewis once said that pride is a spiritual cancer that destroys love, contentment, and even common sense. Narcissists thrive on control and chaos, often making you feel responsible for their pain. The Bible warns us in 2 Timothy 3 verses 2-5 that in the last days, people will be lovers of themselves, proud and abusive, having a form of godliness but denying its power. These people can make you question your own faith and self-worth. But God doesn't call us to confusion. He calls us to peace and clarity. His truth helps us discern when love is being twisted into manipulation. Have you ever been in a relationship where someone shifts between praise and criticism, leaving you unsure of your worth? This emotional roller coaster can break your spirit. Grandiose narcissists crave admiration, demanding the world revolve around their desires. But when things don't go their way, they collapse and lash out. On the other hand, vulnerable narcissists play the victim, drawing you in with stories of being wronged until you shoulder their burdens, neglecting your own needs. The Bible reminds us in 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4-5 that love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. Genuine love uplifts and nurtures, it never seeks to dominate or destroy. Yet narcissistic behavior can be a trap where masks fall and new ones take their place. A grandiose person can quickly become fragile, demanding your pity, while a vulnerable one can rise to a pedestal of arrogance when praised. This constant shifting can make you feel like you're holding on to sand. No matter how tightly you grip, it slips away. The emotional whiplash of their behavior is designed to keep you distracted and unsure of reality. But remember, God is not the author of confusion. Psalm 147 verse 3 says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." We find peace when we anchor ourselves in His unchanging truth and set boundaries that protect our hearts. Sometimes narcissism hides beneath generosity. You may know someone who appears selfless and giving, yet their kindness comes with strings attached. They expect admiration in return, and when they don't receive it, their kindness turns into resentment. Communal narcissists love to be praised for their sacrifices and make you feel guilty for not applauding their efforts. C.S. Lewis wrote that pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next person. Genuine service is quiet and humble, seeking no spotlight. Galatians 1 verse 10 reminds us that we live to please God, not humans. True generosity comes from love, not a desire for applause. Recognizing these behaviors is the first step to reclaiming your peace. Jesus Himself set boundaries, retreating to pray and standing firm against those who tried to manipulate Him. We are called to do the same. Love does not mean tolerating abuse or control. Romans 12 verse 9 says, "Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good." Sometimes, walking away from toxic behavior is the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the person trying to control you. As we close, remember that your worth is not tied to someone else's approval, but to God's unchanging love. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Let this truth guide you to peace. Have you ever wondered why someone who seems confident and self-assured can suddenly crumble into self-pity, demanding your sympathy? Or why someone who plays the victim can, in an instant, rise to a place of superiority, looking down on everyone? This constant shift between neediness and dominance can leave you emotionally drained, making you feel responsible for their happiness. Today, we'll explore how these dynamics affect your heart and how you can find freedom in God's truth. When things are going their way, grandiose narcissists appear unstoppable. They bask in praise, using it as fuel to build their inflated self-image. But the moment life doesn't meet their expectations, their confidence shatters, and they become resentful, expecting you to absorb their bitterness. Suddenly, you find yourself in an emotional tug-of-war, where you're blamed for their failures and expected to fix their broken pride. Have you ever experienced that exhausting cycle? Vulnerable narcissists, on the other hand, thrive on pity and pull at your empathy with their tales of how life has wronged them. But as soon as they receive praise or success, their humility disappears, replaced by a need to control and dominate. C.S. Lewis insightfully observed that a proud person is always looking down on things and people, which makes it impossible for them to look up to anything higher than themselves. This is what makes these relationships so damaging. They keep you focused downward, always trying to meet their emotional demands, while your sense of self-worth slowly crumbles. You begin to question your own perception of reality, convinced that if you were just more patient or understanding, everything would get better. But the truth is, no amount of self-sacrifice will satisfy someone who is trapped in pride. The Bible reminds us in James 1 verse 17 that every good and perfect gift comes from God, who does not change like shifting shadows. Unlike the instability of manipulative relationships, God's love is constant and unwavering. His truth anchors you when you feel lost in emotional chaos. Recognizing these shifting behaviors is not about judging others, it's about reclaiming your peace and learning to walk in discernment. In some cases, this emotional control can become even darker. Have you ever sensed that beneath someone's charm lies a calculated intent to dominate? This is where narcissism crosses into something more dangerous, what some call malignant narcissism. These individuals don't just seek admiration, they seek total control. They use gaslighting, blame, and guilt to isolate their victims and make them doubt their own reality. Proverbs 4 verse 23 tells us, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Protecting your heart means recognizing when someone's intent is not to love, but to break you down. These tactics are subtle at first. Perhaps you've heard cutting remarks passed off as jokes, or felt the sting of blame when you've done nothing wrong. They may say things like, "You're too sensitive," or "You're overreacting," making you feel as though your feelings are the real issue. Slowly, your confidence erodes, and you begin to doubt your own experiences. This is not love, it's control disguised as care. But remember, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind, 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. His truth restores your clarity and reminds you that you are not called to live in confusion and fear. The first step toward healing is recognizing when someone's need for control is distorting your reality. Sometimes, the most faithful response is to step back and seek refuge in God's love rather than try to appease someone who cannot be satisfied. Jesus himself modeled this when he withdrew from crowds and individuals who sought to trap him with their words. Setting boundaries is not a lack of love, it's an act of wisdom. As you reflect, remember that your worth is rooted in God's love, not in someone else's approval. If this has touched your heart, take a moment to comment, "I choose truth and peace." Have you ever felt trapped in a relationship where love feels more like a battlefield than a place of peace? One moment, you're met with affection. The next, with cold silence or blame. It's as though you're constantly walking on eggshells, unsure of what will set off a storm. These experiences don't just wear down your emotions, they make you question your identity and worth. But today, I invite you to remember that God's love for you is steady and unchanging. You are not alone. This emotional turbulence is often by design. Narcissists, especially those driven by grandiosity, feed on admiration and control. When praised, they seem warm and magnetic. But when their pride is threatened, they lash out or retreat into bitterness, pulling you into their emotional chaos. Vulnerable narcissists, by contrast, appear fragile and misunderstood, often using guilt to draw you into their orbit. Over time, These dynamics make it easy to forget who you are because you're so busy managing their emotions. The Bible reminds us in Psalm 147 verse 3 that God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. You were never meant to carry the burden of someone else's emotional well-being at the cost of your own. True love, as described in 1 Corinthians 13, does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. Love builds up, it doesn't tear down. Yet in toxic relationships, love is twisted into a tool for control and validation. Have you ever noticed how someone's kindness can come with invisible strings attached? Communal narcissists often appear generous and selfless, always eager to help and be seen as righteous. But beneath this facade, there is a hunger for praise. Their sacrifices must be noticed, applauded, and affirmed, or their kindness turns into resentment. Maybe you've experienced the sting of their disappointment when you failed to meet their unspoken expectations. C.S. Lewis wrote that pride takes no pleasure in having something, only in having more of it than the next person. This kind of pride corrupts even good deeds, turning service into a performance. When you begin to see this pattern, it can be heartbreaking, especially if the person is someone you admire or love. You may feel trapped between your desire to please them and your need for peace. But Galatians 1 verse 10 asks us, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. True service flows from love, not from the need to be celebrated. And true kindness is given freely, not as a tool to manipulate or control. Learning to recognize these behaviors helps you guard your heart. Jesus himself set an example by refusing to be manipulated. When the Pharisees tried to trap him with their words, he didn't engage in their games. He responded with truth and at times simply walked away. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you're being unkind. It means you're honoring the life and peace God has given you. In Proverbs 4 verses 14 to 15, we're reminded, do not set foot on the path of the wicked. Avoid it. Do not travel on it. Sometimes, the wisest choice is to step away from toxic interactions rather than getting caught in endless explanations or attempts to earn someone's approval. It's not your job to convince someone who's determined to control you. Your responsibility is to protect the peace God has placed in your heart and trust that He will guide you in wisdom. As we continue this reflection, take a moment to breathe and remember that your value doesn't come from someone else's approval. It comes from the one who calls you beloved. You are stronger than you think, and God's love is your shield. Have you ever felt invisible in a relationship, as though your needs, feelings, and boundaries don't matter? You give and give, hoping for understanding and love, but instead, you're met with blame, criticism, or silent withdrawal. This experience can make you feel as though you're losing yourself piece by piece. But you were never meant to live in someone else's shadow. God's love calls you to live in truth and freedom. One of the hardest truths to accept is that some people only see relationships as a means of control rather than connection. Malignant narcissists, in particular, don't just crave admiration, they crave dominance. Their charm often hides a heart hardened by manipulation. They use subtle tactics like gaslighting to distort your reality, making you question your thoughts and memories. Maybe you've heard phrases like, that never happened, or you're imagining things, until you began to doubt your own experiences. This isn't love, it's control. But 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. His truth is the anchor that steadies us when someone else tries to shake our foundation. Have you ever noticed how blame can be used as a weapon? Narcissists are experts at deflecting responsibility, making you feel as though their anger, disappointment, or failures are somehow your fault. You may hear things like, if you hadn't done that, I wouldn't have reacted this way. Slowly, their shame and guilt become your burden. But this is a lie meant to keep you trapped. Proverbs 4 verse 23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guarding your heart means knowing when to step away from blame that was never yours to carry. It's especially painful when these dynamics play out in the name of morality or faith. Self-righteous narcissists present themselves as paragons of virtue, using their perceived goodness to control others. Their correction may sound like wisdom, but it often carries the sting of superiority. They use guilt and shame to make you feel small, as though you're unworthy unless you meet their impossible standards. But God does not bind us with perfectionism, He offers us grace. Romans 8 verse 1 assures us, "There is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." His love frees you from the chains of judgment. Jesus modeled what it means to live with wisdom and courage. When He encountered people who misused religion for control, He spoke truth with firmness and grace. He didn't allow their criticism to define His identity or mission. In the same way, you are called to walk in your God-given worth, even if it means stepping back from voices that try to tear you down. Setting boundaries is not disobedience, it's protection. Your well-being matters to God, and His love calls you to live in safety and peace. If you've ever felt trapped in the emotional fog of manipulation, know that clarity begins when you remember who you are in Christ. You don't have to explain, defend, or prove yourself to someone who refuses to listen. Instead, practice radical acceptance. Understand that they may never change, but you can choose peace. This doesn't mean abandoning compassion. It means entrusting the situation to God rather than trying to fix it yourself. As you reflect on this, remember that God's plans for you are for peace and hope. Comment, "I am shielded by His grace," if you're choosing to walk in that truth today. You are not defined by someone else's approval. You are defined by the one who calls you beloved. Let His truth be your guide. Have you ever wondered how someone's words can make you doubt your own memories and instincts? Manipulative people often use subtle tactics to make you question your reality, trapping you in a web of confusion. This tactic, known as gaslighting, leaves you emotionally vulnerable and dependent on their version of the truth. But you don't have to live in that confusion. God's truth is a light that cuts through the fog, reminding you of who you are. Gaslighting often starts small, a dismissive laugh when you express your feelings or a comment like, "You're being dramatic." Over time, these small denials of your reality can make you feel isolated and unsure of yourself. You might even stop trusting your own judgment, apologizing for things that weren't your fault just to avoid more conflict. This erosion of your confidence is not accidental. It's designed to keep you silent and controlled. But James 1 verse 17 reminds us that God is the Father of lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. His truth is steady and unchanging, anchoring you when others try to distort reality. When dealing with someone who uses manipulation, one of the strongest defenses is refusing to engage in their games. Narcissists thrive on arguments where they can twist your words and provoke guilt. Instead of explaining yourself endlessly, sometimes the wisest response is a simple, calm refusal. "I'm not discussing this." Proverbs 4 verses 14 to 15 says, "Do not set foot on the path of the wicked. Avoid it. Do not travel on it." Walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's a way of choosing peace over chaos. It's also important to recognize that you don't have to navigate this journey alone. Relationships marked by manipulation and control can leave you feeling isolated, but seeking support from trusted friends, faith leaders, or counselors can provide the strength and clarity you need. Even Moses needed help when he grew weary. His friends held up his arms when he couldn't stand alone. Exodus 17 verse 12. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a declaration that you're choosing healing and truth over isolation. For some, the hardest part is the fear of what happens when you set boundaries. You might worry that distancing yourself is unloving or that you're failing in your calling to show grace. But love doesn't mean enabling someone's destructive behavior. Romans 12 verse 9 reminds us, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. True love seeks what is good, not what keeps you in harm's way. Setting limits isn't about punishment, it's about creating space where peace can grow. Perhaps you've wondered how to find hope after enduring such emotional turmoil. The answer lies in God's unshakable love. He calls you not to a life of fear and confusion, but to one of peace and clarity. Psalm 139 verse 14 declares that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. This truth is your shield against lies that try to diminish your worth. You don't need anyone else's approval to live fully in the freedom God has given you. As we close, remember that healing begins with a single step: the decision to believe that you are worthy of peace, joy, and love. You are not defined by someone else's manipulation. You are defined by the one who knit you together with purpose and love. If this message has strengthened you, comment, "I am walking in freedom." Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs encouragement. You are never alone. God's grace surrounds you, guiding you every step of the way. Let His love lead you to lasting peace.